that just happened with his employees arguing?
Are we talking?
If your employees start arguing and you in that seat that Joe was sitting in, how do you deal with that?
First of all, the people that I work with is genuinely my friends, like really my friends. I don't think none of them niggas is Joe Budden's friends, in my opinion. When I seen it, it seemed territorial. It seemed like Queen Flip is being territorial because he was there before Lamont and probably don't like Lamont being there. And what I heard Lamont say is like, oh, you ain't really basically, you know, be nice to the new people or welcome them or whatever. And it turned into niggas saying, let's step outside. Me, let's say it's people in this room. I'm not gonna let y'all fight each other. Not on my watch, no. I can't, I'm not gonna let you do that. As friends, no. As niggas I don't give a fuck about, yeah, swing so we can boost my ratings up.
Urban Artificial Intelligence Strategic Thinking Media Platform. Camron recently went viral in a new clip saying that Joe Budden co-hosts on the Joe Budden podcast aren't his friends. This was an interesting take to me because I believe that this was intentional by Joe. All right, I believe Joe intentionally gets co-hosts on the show who have tension with each other and sometimes with him. He does it on purpose for his whole COE, for his whole content over everything. All right, Joe has been masterminding this since the beginning. He's been masterminding this since losing Rory and Maul. This whole new lineup that he did once he brought in Ice and Ish, that was his goal. To let two of his co-hosts come together and create a bond stronger than what he has to them. And I think that's kind of what happened with Rory and Maul. I think they both felt like they were being robbed, so they kind of share, you know, it was kind of a trauma bond because they both felt like they were being done wrong by Joe. But Joe didn't want that to happen again. He didn't want two of his co-hosts to, you know, have a bond like that to where they're talking, you know, behind his back, or they're having conversations that don't involve him, or they're both having conversations about discrepancies. So what Joe has done is created a tension on this podcast, and I spoke about this many times before. He's created tension on the podcast between the co-hosts. He creates tension intentionally between his own co-hosts. Now, in my opinion, I think it was an experiment, but it went so well that he has continued to do it. So he can have good ratings. He can have viral moments when he don't have an interview, when a news week is slow, when there's nothing going on in the news week. He can still have viral moments because if his crew is beefing with each other, that's going to be the viral moments right there. His crew beefing with each other. So he doesn't need anything else. He doesn't need any outside interviews. He doesn't need a whole lot to be going on in the news. If it's a slow news week, they can beef with each other. He also has platforms getting information from the JBP, which I think Joe himself could be leaking. I remember, I don't know if it was Aisha Ish in a recent episode, maybe it was Flip. In a recent episode, one of them said it's a mole up here on the JBP who's feeding the outside people information. That could be Joe, y'all. That could be Joe. When you look at platforms like the JBP TV community, some of these Joe Budden podcast Twitter pages, some of these Joe Budden podcast spaces, some of these platforms know way too much about the Joe Budden podcast. Some of these people on these platforms will say shit, and a week later, 7, 8, 9, 10 days later, the shit will happen. They know way too much about the inside, you know, functioning, the inside workings of the JBP. Now, how they getting this information, I don't know. I don't know if it's Joe himself just releasing this information. I don't know if it's a co-host or if it's a lower level person, like maybe an equipment person or an assistant giving them this information. But whatever the case is, whoever said that, whichever co-host said it, it's a mole in the JBP camp. I definitely agree with him. I definitely think that's true. Now, when Camron made these comments, he was specifically speaking on Queen's Flip and Marc Lamont. Y'all remember when they got into that whole fight over Queen's Flip calling Marc Lamont a sucker? They almost got into a fight. They damn near started fighting. That created a weird dynamic. All right? It created a weird dynamic, and that's kind of what started that whole viral argument. That is kind of what started people probing the Joe Budden podcast co-host friendship. Because when we seen that happen with Marc Lamont and Queen's Flip, we was like, damn, these niggas don't really fuck with each other. But that was the dynamic that Joe created early. Flip spoke on Joe, feeling like he could treat him any kind of way because Joe thought he didn't need Flip anymore. That was part of the situation as well. All right, Joe brought Marc Lamont into the fold of the Joe Budden podcast to counter Flip. That's why he brought Mona to counter Flip as well. He brought Mona to replace Melissa and to counter Flip. That's how he makes his decisions about who to bring on the podcast. The most important decision is not if the person is funny. It's not if the person looks good. It's not if the person is smart and knowledgeable. It's how they interact with the other co-hosts. That's the number one thing Joe Budden is watching and paying attention to. And he immediately seen Flip and Marc Lamont Hill. It's the intellectual guy versus the hood guy. That's been their dynamic in their relationship for a minute. From the beginning, that's kind of what the internet and the fan base pitted them against each other as. Flip is the street guy from the hood who know all the street politics. Marc Lamont is the smart dude from Penn who knows all the intellectual details about everything from politics to hip hop to whatever the case may be. All right. So that's kind of how they was pitted against each other. Now, when people like Camron say things like this out loud, it kind of solidifies what I've been saying from the jump. It solidifies what I've been saying the whole time. Because somebody like Camron, who is a viewer, who is somebody viewing the podcast, he can see it too. He can see that they don't really seem cool. And I think this is Joe Budden's engineering. I think they could be cooler. But because Joe Budden wants this competition, this is the tension that we get. Camron also spoke on letting two friends fight because if you pay attention, when Marc Lamont and Queen's Flip was about to fight, Joe actually told him to go outside and fight. Now, Camron said if those was his friends, he wouldn't have let them fight at all. There's no way he would have let them get that far into a fight. Now, he said if it was two people that wasn't his friends, he would have said what Joe Budden said. He would have been like, hey, y'all take that outside. Y'all go fight outside. He basically was saying he wouldn't let his friends fight under any circumstances. Now, I got to agree with Camron in that instance, man. I'm not going to sit and watch my friends fight. This, to me, is an example of COE. Joe Budden, content over everything. He's willing to watch his friends fight just to get content. And when he told him to go outside and fight, take it outside of the studio, do y'all think a camera wasn't going to follow them? Get in the comments and let me know. Do y'all think a camera would have followed them? I do. I believe a camera would have followed him. I believe Joe would have wanted to get that on camera. I believe Joe might have even wanted to put it on Patreon. And I'm not saying he would have let them have a full-fledged fight. But I do think he would have let them get a couple hits in. Then he would have jumped in and broke it up. Y'all get in the comments. Let me know what y'all think. Now, I think this is going to go a little bit further because Joe Budden and Camron have beef before. They've went back and forth on multiple occasions. Camron also beefed with Melissa when she was on the Joe Budden podcast. She said some crazy shit about Camron and May seemingly for no reason. And, you know, that started a beef between Camron and Melissa Ford. And during that beef, the guys kind of stayed out of it. I think Melissa Ford wanted the guys on the Joe Budden podcast to kind of stick up for a little bit more against Camron, but that is something that she started, and she said something completely stupid, and she kind of deserved what was said back to her. Now, that lets me know Camron and Joe Budden don't like each other, man. They never have. Joe Budden recently in a interview or something, he said they were cool and they just, you know, they go back and forth for banter. I don't believe that. I don't think they really like each other. They were never really cool as rappers. They don't really have a lot of songs together. And, you know, they both kind of are in the same circles when it comes to women as well. So that always leads to rivalries or whatever the case may be. But I want y'all to get in the comments and let me know, is this a strategic move by Camron? Does Camron want Joe Budden to respond to him? What is Joe Budden going to say to his co-host about this? Are they going to bring this up? Is Joe Budden going to address this? Is he going to address this on his show? Is he going to speak on these comments on his show? Is he going to ask his co-host what they think about this? Is he going to say, hey, Camron said it don't look like we friends. What do y'all think? Or is he gonna ignore it? I think this has the potential to turn into a pod war. Both these dudes are petty. Both these dudes are disrespectful. So the possibility is there, but I want y'all to get in the comments and let me know. Camron says the co-hosts on the JBP aren't friends. I agree with him, but I think it was Joe's engineering. I think everything is happening on the Joe Budden podcast how it's supposed to be happening. All this internal drama is part of Joe plan. Camron noticed it too, and he called it out. Y'all get in the comments and let me know what y'all think about it. Urban Artificial Intelligence, strategic thinking media platform. I'm going to see y'all on the next episode. Peace.